Today, I'm at Itasca State Park on the east arm of Lake Itasca, just below Douglas Lodge. I'm here to walk the trail that honors a man who was known to some in Minneapolis as their doctor, but to others, he was known as one of the country's preeminent ornithologists. Join me as I walk the Dr. Roberts Trail and relate the story of Minnesota's Birdman. The Dr. Roberts Trail is about 2 miles long. It begins near the fishing pier below Douglas Lodge, loops through the forest, and then ends on the service road on the back side of Douglas Lodge. This trail is a natural surface trail, so there's rocks and roots to watch out for. It's also a bit hilly. The Dr. Roberts Trail is a self-guided nature trail. If you want, you can borrow a guide to the trail in the Forest Inn gift shop. The guide was written by Ben Toma, the park's naturalist for 44 years. He placed 101 markers along the trail to identify different trees and plants. He also incorporated information about how the Ojibwe used that plant. That information came from the writings of Frances Densmore of Red Wing, Minnesota. She researched and wrote about how the Ojibwe used plants for food, medicine, and household items. Although the booklet has a lot of information about the plants you'll see along the trail, it doesn't tell you much about Dr. Roberts. So as I walk the trail, I'll relate a bit about the life of Dr. Roberts so you can get an idea of why the park honors him with this trail. Thomas Adler Roberts was born in 1858 outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Sometime while Thomas was a young boy, his father, John Roberts, contracted tuberculosis. To regain his health, John Roberts was advised to move to Minnesota and to expose himself to as much fresh air and sunshine as possible. John Roberts and his wife, Elizabeth Sadler, moved their young family to Minnesota and settled in Minneapolis. Thomas, 9 years old, was the oldest of their 3 children. Thomas Roberts' love of birds likely began when he accompanied his father on walks and buggy rides in the countryside around Minneapolis. John Roberts had an interest in the natural world, and on these outings, he passed along that interest to Thomas. Father and son both carried shotguns. The shooting of birds for sport was a common recreational activity of the era. But for Thomas Roberts, shooting birds was not just for recreation. It was also a way to collect bird specimens so he could identify and study them. From the birds he shot, he learned how to make bird skins. Shooting birds and making bird skins helped Thomas Roberts identify and classify the different birds he was seeing. Also, when he was 16 years old, Thomas Roberts began a bird journal. In his journal, he recorded in meticulous detail information about all the birds he saw. About a quarter-mile from the start of the Dr. Roberts Trail, it passes the old-timers cabin. The cabin was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps in 1934. Although it's called a cabin, it was never a place where someone lived. Its construction provided the boys of the Civilian Conservation Corps with valuable work experience during the Great Depression. The logs were hand-hewn from pine trees that had fallen in the park. Today, the cabin reminds hikers along the trail of the size of the pine trees that were once found in this park, and, with proper conservation, what they could be once again. There's no connection between Dr. Roberts and this cabin, although its message of conservation is one that he would certainly approve. As teenagers, Thomas and his friends started a club they called the Young Naturalist Society. In the countryside around Minneapolis, the young naturalists shot birds, trapped animals, and gathered plants. They held meetings in Thomas Roberts' bedroom. Over the life of the Young Naturalist Society, Thomas's bedroom began to resemble a museum rather than a place to sleep. He estimated that they had collected 500 plant specimens and 600 bird skins. Around this time, Philo Hatch, a homeopathic physician and amateur ornithologist, published his Report on the Birds of Minnesota. A few years later, he published his Notes on the Birds of Minnesota. Thomas Roberts recognized that Philo Hatch was very enthusiastic about birds, but that his publications were incomplete and not entirely accurate. Even as a teenager, Thomas Roberts was meticulous and detail-oriented. Throughout his life, he dreamed of being able to create accurate, comprehensive descriptions of all the birds of Minnesota. After he graduated from high school, Thomas Roberts enrolled in the University of Minnesota. Although he wasn't sure of his future career, he knew it involved science. As his studies permitted, he continued his pursuit of natural history, recording the birds he saw in his journal. When his sophomore year ended, Thomas headed out to western Minnesota for a 2-week bird collecting trip. Thomas was especially interested in the pelicans that were nesting in the area. Although he didn't find any pelicans, he was able to collect other prairie birds. In July, he headed up to Grand Marais to collect plants and animals as part of Minnesota's Natural History Survey. The trip lasted 5 weeks, but halfway through, he started feeling ill. When he returned to Minneapolis, concerns about his health increased. The fear was that he too, like his father, had contracted tuberculosis. Now he too took fresh air walks and buggy rides throughout the countryside around Minneapolis. In the fall, Thomas Roberts did not return to the University of Minnesota. Without the restriction of his academic studies, Thomas was free to pursue his passion. For national publications, he wrote short articles and contributed his notes on Minnesota birds. From his collection of bird skins, he supplied other organizations, like the Smithsonian Institution, with bird skins. Thomas Roberts was now developing a national reputation for his knowledge of birds. By the following spring, he was feeling better. He applied for a job as a land examiner on the St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Manitoba Railway. The job took him all over Minnesota, and his bird journal went with him. In the evening, he noted the birds he spotted while working. Occasionally, he collected eggs or shot a bird for his collection. By the fall of 1882, Thomas Roberts had decided on the direction of his life. He recognized that ornithology, as a profession, was still in its infancy, and that he needed to select a different career path, and he chose medicine. That fall, he enrolled in the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. While still in medical school, Thomas Roberts was invited to become a member of the newly formed American Ornithologist Union. He accepted and remained an active member for the rest of his life. 3 years later, he graduated from medical school. He briefly returned to Minneapolis to spend time with his parents and to propose marriage to Jane Cleveland. The marriage would have to wait, however. Dr. Roberts returned to Philadelphia to complete a residency at the Philadelphia Children's Hospital and one at the Philadelphia General Hospital. After he completed his residencies, Dr. Roberts returned to Minneapolis for good. He married Jane Cleveland and opened a private medical practice on the edge of downtown. Over the years, his practice grew. Some of the titans of the Minneapolis flour milling industry became his patients. He was the personal physician to James Stroud Bell, the president of the Washburn Crosby Company, and also with his son, James Ford Bell. The younger Bell would eventually create the General Mills Company. Although James Ford Bell was 19 years younger than Dr. Roberts, they had a lot in common. They were both born in Philadelphia, and both were passionate about birds and nature. In addition to his private medical practice, Dr. Roberts served as chief of staff at St. Barnabas Hospital in downtown Minneapolis. At St. Barnabas, he befriended another doctor who was then an intern at the hospital, Dr. Leslie Dart. The two doctors had a common interest beyond medicine. Of course, it was birds. In the years ahead, Dr. Dart would assist Dr. Roberts not just with his medical practice, but with his bird work as well. Another significant person in Dr. Roberts' medical practice was Mabel Densmore. Dr. Roberts hired Mabel to be his office manager and lab assistant. Mabel, like Dr. Dart, would also prove indispensable in Dr. Roberts' bird work. After 7 years as chief of staff at St. Barnabas Hospital, he stepped down. For a while, he concentrated on just his medical practice. Over the years, his reputation in obstetrics had grown. About a year after he left St. Barnabas, the University of Minnesota appointed him professor of pediatrics, an unpaid position. For the next 13 years, he taught in the university's medical school while still retaining his private practice. Prior to the 1890s, photography was primarily limited to professional photographers and indoor photography studios. But after 1890, advancements in camera technology made photography accessible to amateurs and hobbyists. Photographs no longer needed to be immediately developed in a darkroom. Cameras could be carried outdoors, making nature and wildlife photography possible. Dr. Roberts was quick to see the potential for the new camera technology. Photography opened new opportunities for studying birds and their behavior. With his camera, he no longer needed a shotgun to kill a bird to study it. Dr. Roberts, along with his friend and photography mentor, Frank Chapman of the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, were early pioneers in the field of nature photography. The two men bonded over their love of birds and their interest in photography. In a break from his medical practice, Dr. Roberts, with his camera, headed out to Heron Lake in southwest Minnesota. There, he photographed herons, terns, coots, and grebes. As much as his medical practice allowed, Dr. Roberts traveled around Minnesota photographing birds. Sometimes he was accompanied by Dr. Leslie Dart, whom he considered a first-class birdman. He photographed warblers along the Mississippi River at Lake Pepin and killdeer in the cornfields outside Minneapolis. Dr. Roberts recognized that his photographs would enable others to experience the beauty of birds as well. He recruited Dr. Dart and Mabel Densmore to make magic lantern slides from his bird photographs. A magic lantern was an early form of a slide projector. Dr. Roberts wanted the magic lantern slide show so he could share his knowledge of birds with large groups of people. In the fall of 1898, at the annual meeting of the American Ornithologists' Union in Washington, D.C., Dr. Roberts presented his magic lantern slideshow. It featured his photographs of chickadees, warblers, killdeers, bitterns, and downy woodpeckers. And the next year, at the annual meeting in Philadelphia, Dr. Roberts presented his slideshow on Franklin's gulls. Needless to say, both presentations were a success. Around the same time, Frank Chapman started publication of Bird Lore, a magazine for members of the Audubon chapters. Bird Lore would eventually be renamed Audubon Magazine. In the first issue, he published an article by Dr. Roberts titled, "The Camera as an Aid in the Study of Birds." In addition to being one of the pioneers in the still photography of birds, Dr. Roberts was also an early adopter of the motion picture camera in nature photography. At the American Ornithologists' Union annual meeting in 1916, Dr. Roberts illustrated his presentation, Home Life of Minnesota Birds, using movies he had taken with his motion picture camera. In the summer of 1902, Dr. Roberts took his wife and 3 children on a summer vacation. They came here to Itasca State Park. Only a decade earlier, Minnesota established this state park around Lake Itasca and the headwaters of the Mississippi River. At that time, only a few hundred adventurous tourists made their way north to the park each year. While Dr. Roberts was in Itasca State Park, Dr. Dart most likely looked after his patients in Minneapolis. The vacation was an opportunity for Dr. Roberts to use his camera. He also banded birds and used his shotgun to collect a few specimens. While 1902 was his first year to visit this park, it was not his last. For a number of years afterwards, Dr. Roberts used Itasca State Park as a summer home for his family. They stayed at a cabin near Douglas Lodge. Later on, for 2 weeks in August, he would teach ornithology and lead bird walks at the Boy Scouts Scoutmasters Training Camp. The camp was held here in the park at the University of Minnesota's Forestry School's facilities, now known as the Itasca Biological Station. One summer, Dr. Roberts invited a friend from his youth, William Kilgore, to visit him here at Itasca State Park. William Kilgore was an avid birder. He had previously accompanied Dr. Roberts on his birding trips to Lake City and southeastern Minnesota. But, he told Dr. Roberts, that somehow he had always connected his name with Itasca. In 1915, At the age of 57, Dr. Roberts retired from his medical career, mostly. While he gave up his medical practice, 25 families, most notably the family of James Ford Bell, kept him on retainer as their personal physician. At the time of his retirement, the Mayo brothers, who were his personal friends, called Dr. Roberts one of the top 5 diagnosticians in the country. Dr. Roberts was not idle for long. The regents of the University of Minnesota appointed him professor of ornithology and associate curator of the university's zoological museum. Both positions were unpaid. Dr. Roberts worked without a salary for his first 4 years at the university. To his new positions, Dr. Roberts brought with him a wealth of knowledge about the birds of Minnesota, including a collection of 6,000 bird skins, 2,000 still photographs of birds, a growing collection of bird movies, and many friends with deep pockets, like James Ford Bell. The university's zoological museum had recently moved to the 3rd floor of the new animal biology building on the Minneapolis campus. Dr. Roberts immediately began to organize the museum's collection around the state's biomes. His first project was creating a habitat group, or diorama, that showed beavers in their natural environment. The beaver diorama is based on the beavers here in Itasca State Park. The creators of the diorama spent 6 weeks in Itasca making molds of plants, gathering wood, and creating sketches for the background. As professor of ornithology, Dr. Roberts began his first class with 6 students, 5 women and 1 man. Many of the students who enrolled in his class were women, education majors who would teach in the schools around Minnesota. In addition to lectures, in the spring, Dr. Roberts would take his students out in the field with binoculars to observe whatever birds they could find. The students took what they learned from his class and spread his love of birds to the cities and towns all across Minnesota. A few years after he started at the museum, Dr. Roberts was appointed director of the university's zoological museum. During his tenure, the museum was renamed the Minnesota Museum of Natural History. He remained director of the museum for 27 years until his death. Likewise, Dr. Roberts remained the university's professor of ornithology and continued to teach his class right up until his death. As a young man, Thomas Roberts saw the need for an accurate, comprehensive description of the birds of Minnesota. Throughout his medical career, he relished the idea of publishing a book on the birds of Minnesota. Now that he was in his 60s, creating this book became his highest priority. To assist him, Dr. Roberts hired Mabel Densmore. When he had his medical practice, Mabel was his office manager. She shared his love of birds and had the organizational skills for such a monumental project. Mabel organized the bird notes he had been collecting over the last 45 years, ever since the 16-year-old teenager began his bird journal. Mabel combined Dr. Roberts' notes with the notes of 161 bird observers, friends and former students, spread across the state. She consolidated the material for each species and then gave it to Dr. Roberts. He wrote the text and then she typed the manuscript. Dr. Roberts gave her a place to work in the museum. For 7 years, Mabel and Dr. Roberts worked on the book. Finally, in 1932, the book was ready for publication. The University of Minnesota Press agreed to publish it, despite its concerns about how many copies it could sell. The Birds of Minnesota was 1,512 pages long, split into 2 volumes. Many of the sections of the book were illustrated with line drawings and with photographs, including many taken by Dr. Roberts himself. It also contained 139 color plates. Dr. Roberts wrote his book not just for academics or professional ornithologists, but also for amateur bird watchers. He wanted the average person who sees a bird to be able to identify and learn about it. He was afraid, however, that the cost of printing this 2-volume book would make it unaffordable to many people, especially now that the country was in the grip of the Great Depression. James Ford Bell and Dr. Roberts' other wealthy patrons stepped in again. They provided money to subsidize the printing of the book. Their subsidy reduced the cost of the book to an affordable $6 for the 2-volume set. The concerns of the University of Minnesota Press proved to be unfounded. The first printing of 1,000 copies sold out in 3 days. The second printing, another 1,000 copies, sold out in a couple of weeks, and half the copies of the third printing had already been spoken for. Dr. Roberts' friend and colleague, Frank Chapman of the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, reviewed the book in Bird Lore magazine. Of course he praised it. He wrote how its publication would bring about more effective conservation, better sportsmanship, and, above all, a closer companionship with birds. The American Ornithologists Union awarded Dr. Roberts its William Brewster Memorial Award for the Birds of Minnesota. The Brewster Award is given for the most meritorious book on the birds of the Western Hemisphere. Dr. Roberts was dedicated to public education. He was always looking for new ways to engage the public in his love of birds and nature. In the 1920s, he began to deliver his bird talks over the radio. His first talks were on WCCO radio before moving to WLB, the University of Minnesota's radio station. His radio talks were as popular over the radio as they were in person. Many listeners requested transcripts of his radio talks, and Dr. Roberts was happy to provide them. In the 1920s, Dr. Roberts launched a program to bring the Museum of Natural History to the people all across the state. He directed the museum's staff to build small dioramas of the state's birds and mammals. The small dioramas were portable, so they could be sent to schools in rural Minnesota. By the 1940s, the museum's staff had built 143 of these small, portable dioramas that they circulated throughout the state. In the summer, the state parks displayed the dioramas. Here at Itasca State Park, the park's naturalist, Ben Thoma, used these dioramas as part of the park's naturalist program. Today, in the park's Lakeside Museum, you can see some of the dioramas the museum staff built as part of Dr. Roberts' educational outreach. In 1938, Dr. Roberts went to visit James Ford Bell in his office in downtown Minneapolis. Bell had been asking Dr. Roberts about building a wolf diorama for the museum. On this day, he asked again. Dr. Roberts responded, as he had in the past, that there just wasn't room in the museum. To house a big exhibit like timber wolves would require a new building. So began the planning for a new museum. Unlike the current museum, the new museum would be designed to display the ever-increasing number of dioramas and educational displays. During the Great Depression, the Minnesota legislature did not have the money to fund the new building. So the regents of the University of Minnesota turned to the Public Works Administration of President Roosevelt's New Deal. The Public Works Administration provided $122,000 for the new museum. James Ford Bell then provided the rest, $150,000. Dr. Roberts, now in his 80s, oversaw the construction of the new Minnesota Museum of Natural History. It opened in 1940 at a much more visible location, the corner of Church Street and University Avenue on the edge of the university's Minneapolis campus. In later years, the museum would be renamed the James Ford Bell Museum of Natural History, or just the Bell Museum, after its primary benefactor. By the time Dr. Roberts was 87, he had had a series of small strokes. Although he recovered, the strokes weakened him, but he still remained active. He still saw his medical patients, he still taught his ornithology class, and he remained director of the Museum of Natural History. In fact, he had recently secured funding for a new diorama, Elk at Inspiration Peak. Unfortunately, he would not live to see the diorama completed. He died in April 1946 at the age of 88. Dr. Roberts was remembered for his unwavering regard for the truth, his meticulous regard for detail, and his loyalty to his friends and colleagues. His obituary in the Minneapolis Star noted that few Minnesotans would have observed the wildlife around them if Dr. Roberts had not aroused their interest, and that his two great accomplishments, his book, The Birds of Minnesota, and the Natural History Museum on the campus of the University of Minnesota, will keep alive his memory for generations. A year after his death, the Minneapolis Park Board named the bird sanctuary in Lindell Park in honor of Dr. Roberts. The Thomas Sadler Roberts Bird Sanctuary is a 31-acre woodland and wetland. Bird watchers frequently walk its trails, especially in spring, when migratory birds can be spotted in the sanctuary. That brings us to the end of the Dr. Roberts Trail and my look back at the life of its namesake. I hope this video gives you a little more appreciation for Dr. Roberts and the trail that honors him. In a walk like this, I can't go into too much detail about Dr. Roberts. If you want to learn more, check the description of this video for some resources. Walking a trail like this one is good for the aging body, and continuing to learn is good for the aging brain. I hope this video inspires you to walk this trail or one of the other trails in Itasca State Park. Maybe it will also inspire you to take up bird watching. Bird watching provides mental stimulation, relaxation, and a connection to nature. Dr. Roberts would certainly approve.